The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is one of the countries in the world with the ever-prospering economy and politics. The kind of leadership model provided has made many people around the world, including Africa, to admire their development. In the November 2023 Saudi African Summit at Riyadh, many African heads of states welcomed the collaboration between Saudi Arabia and Africa on a win-win situation. Listen to the contribution that the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia has made in Africa in monetary form injected.
Excellencies, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia provided more than $45 billion to support development and humanitarian projects, and in 54 African countries. Also, King Salman Humanitarian Aid and Relief Center provided more than $450 million in 46 African countries. In the Kingdom, we are determined to develop cooperation and partnership relations with African countries and enhance the fields of trade and integration. With this in mind, we are pleased to announce the launching of the development initiative of the custodian of the two holy mosques in Africa through the inauguration of development projects and programs with an amount that exceeds $1 billion for 10 years. We also look forward to injecting new Saudi investments in different sectors with an amount that exceeds $25 billion of financing and securing $10 billion of exports, as well as providing $5 billion as additional development funding for Africa till 2030. The Kingdom will also increase the number of its embassies to more than 40. The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia was one of the first countries to provide its support for the African Union to have a permanent membership in the G20 out of its belief in the role of the African countries. The Kingdom was keen on supporting innovative solutions to treat the debts of the African countries through its G20 presidency in 2020. The Kingdom worked on launching the debt service suspension initiative for the low-income countries during the pandemic and the common framework for the debt treatment and its restructuring in a number of African countries. The Kingdom supports sustainable development, and it always emphasizes the rights of countries to develop their resources and capabilities. We renew our commitment to the security of energy supplies and sustainability while benefiting from all energy sources and developing clean fuels, technology solutions and systems, as well as providing food to more than 750 million in Africa. We aim to host Expo 2030 in Riyadh, to present an extraordinary and unprecedented edition in the history of this exhibition to contribute to a foresighted future for humanity. We look forward to your participation with the Kingdom to highlight the important role of Africa and showcase its human and natural resources, growth opportunities, and future potentials. We are confident that this summit will achieve, God willing, all of our aspirations for quality transformation in the fields of cooperation and partnership between the Kingdom and the African countries. Peace be with you.
Now, how visible are these kinds of projects to the ordinary African is another question to ask on another day. In this year's Saudi African Summit, presidents of African countries were able to present pertinent issues in which they need collaborations with Saudi Arabia. Asumani Azali, the chairman of African Union, demands for respect based on principles that adhere to values, respect for decisions, and embracing a win-win situation during collaborations.
The first principle to which we must adhere is that of respect for others, respect for their values, for their basic founding principles. The second principle is that of consultation for taking joint decisions. This is an essential condition for acceptance of decisions and the effectiveness of their implementation. The third principle is that of mutual benefits and reciprocal interests. Africa and Saudi Arabia has common vision. It is wise that our partnership remains built on the AU Agenda 2063 and the vision of the Kingdom for the decades to come.
But what do Africans demand of their leaders as an emergency that should be addressed in these kinds of intercontinental collaborations?
Within this framework, it is important to take into consideration the potential of Africa, whose population is about 1.5 billion and which has land rich in mining and water resources that encourage public and private investment. The areas of those of African priority, such as infrastructure, energy, agriculture, and food security, new technologies, responses to deterioration of climate conditions, mobilization of financial resources for development, intensification of trade, building human capacities in a manner which is harmonious with the needs of hundreds of millions of youth and women in order to reduce unemployment and limit migration.
Gabon is one of the African countries that has experienced the most recent coup. In his few months of leadership, the current transitional president Brice Oligui was able to present moves by his government that includes paying debts as he calls for more collaboration for the good of Gabonese and Africa at large.
Gabon has opened since August 2023 a new realm for social and economic development. Gabon will fulfill its commitment. I would like to draw your attention that the World Bank and IMF will respect our sovereignty, and for the Saudi Development Bank and the debt for the Saudi Development Bank and for the Islamic Bank, we have fulfilled such debts. So within 2 months, we have maintained our reputation with the international partners, and Gabon is one of the fast-growing economy in the region, and we have created conducive and favorable environment for investment. And I express my hope that this summit will open new era of cooperation between the two countries regarding the infrastructure, industry, and the progress in different avenues of developments.
What is the trade potential that Africa has with its 1.5 billion people, and what is required to add value in the African population in order to amplify international trade? William Ruto, the president of Kenya, thinks Africa can do a lot through collaboration.
We have the combined trade potential. Africa today contributes only 3% of the world's trade. Being small means there is great room for improvement. And therefore, between Saudi Arabia and Africa, we can unlock huge potential of trade, enormous opportunity for investment, and with the capital resources in Saudi Arabia and natural resources in our continent, we can not only power the engines of green manufacturing, green industrialization, and use the opportunity that exists not only to create jobs for the millions of young people in our continent, but to create green products. Already Saudi Arabia is doing a lot in assisting in the finance of our continent. They support the World Bank, they support the IMF. I think that support can also go to African Development Bank, Trade Development Bank, AFC, East African Development Bank, and all the other institutions that support African growth. My request to the Saudi friends is to support these African institutions so that they can support our own economies.
Samia Suluhu, the president of Tanzania, advocates for development of human capital as one of the core elements for prosperity.
And just a note of information that in July this year, Tanzania hosted an African Heads of States Human Capital Summit, which underscored the importance of investment or investing in human capital, particularly the youth, as a roadmap to prosperity. Our desire is to see this new African-Saudi partnership build on the commitments of African leaders by mobilizing support and resources towards human capital development. On the issue of food security, I dare say Africa has what it takes to be a global food basket. However, massive investment in mechanization and modernization of agriculture are required. Now, despite the efforts by the government, private sector, and the local community, more needs to be done. And thus, we welcome the commitment of this summit to prioritize investment in safeguarding regional and global food security.
In this, Nigeria is already making policies that provide a favorable business environment.
Saudi Arabia's Vision 2030 of post-hydrocarbon smart cities and Africa's Agenda 2063 of inclusive development provide a clear path to a future of peace and prosperity for developing countries. The African Continental Free Trade Area of 876 million talented youth is the political economy of the future, with Saudi Arabia as a partner for joint development and growth. Under President Bola Ahmed Tinubu's leadership, Nigeria is committed to attracting business and investment by ensuring policy predictability, secure property rights, and effectiveness of contracts. We have hit the ground running with reforms that have established a unified exchange rate and made it easier for foreign investors to exit with their funds. Subsidies have been removed, and we're focusing on the real sectors of the economy instead of consumption. ECOWAS, under President Tinubu's leadership, has taken a firm stance against the overthrow of constitutional governments in the region. Do not be hoodwinked by romantic notions of military takeovers. They end up pointing their guns at each other, trying to control the capital cities and leave the border areas to the terrorists. For those who may still not be aware, this poses an existential threat, and there must be no weak links in ECOWAS if we are to prevail.
Any war in any part of the world, including pandemics, pose challenges to efforts in joint development struggles.
Severe economic and political difficulties remain on the horizon around the world. This only highlights the compelling need for us to come together, bearing in mind the specific challenges occurring within our respective regions at this time. The lessons for Africa are that we need to speed up our continental integration process in order to make our engagement with partners like Saudi Arabia even more productive. The problems we are facing may seem insurmountable, but there are always solutions to be found and applied. We cannot remain stuck in the past, focused on differences and grievances. We must look forward and shape the future we want for our people. That is how we really wish to see the invitation to meet here.
Excellencies, this important meeting is taking place against the backdrop of several challenges. When the world and our development path are being disrupted by several events. After enduring the negative impact of the global pandemic, including the ongoing conflict in several parts of the world, and recently the escalation of the Palestinian conflict, particularly in Gaza, which has very quickly become a humanitarian tragedy. Aside from the gross human rights violations, these disruptions are seriously affecting the supply chains globally. The humanitarian tragedy unfolding in Gaza cannot leave us impassive, and any such attitude on our part shall violate our own commitment to the international rule of law and our adherence to international humanitarian and peace instruments. Excellencies, the effect of those conflicts have further compounded the already difficult situation with which the developing countries were already facing. The disruption has slowed the growth in most African countries, and urgent joint action is therefore needed. We welcome the Riyadh Declaration, which seeks to address the numerous challenges such as food and energy security issues, infrastructure, development and connectivity, and above all, peace and security.
In all these, contributions to averting adverse impact of climate change remains one of the top agendas in the international collaboration.
Since 2019, Ethiopia has been taking practical measures in contributing to climate change, mitigation, and adaptation. Through this massive afforestation program, which mobilizes over 25 million citizens annually, we have planted 32.5 billion seedlings. By the end of 2026, we will have reached our total target of 50 billion trees planted since the launch of the Green Legacy Initiative. The impact could be equated to removing 64 million gasoline-powered cars from the roads for a whole year. In alignment with the Middle East Green Initiative, our Green Legacy Initiative will have far-reaching and positive generational consequences. We must therefore accelerate cooperation on green development, enhancing the synergy of our green development initiatives.